Before we start, just a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. Only 2% are subscribed at 1,000 subscribers. I'll be posting a special video. My hand was still on her knee when she did it. She leaned across the table and tapped Kyle's forearm. Her eyes stayed on him like I was background noise. I felt my smile lock in place and start to hurt. I'm Mark 34 and I remember the exact second. Not because I'm dramatic, but because my body reacted first. My throat tightened and my ears went hot. I kept chewing like a trained dog, and I hated myself. Kyle blinked like he missed a cue. Jenna's laugh came out too sharp, then died. My wife's mouth stayed half open, like she expected applause. The room went quiet in that violent way, and I waited. She lifted her glass and pointed it at Kyle. Honestly, you're the ideal husband type. She gave me a quick side glance like that covered it. My fingers dug into my own leg under the table. Kyle tried to play it off with a small grin. He looked at me first, then looked away fast. His wife shifted in her chair and stared at her plate. You know that silence that feels like a dare? I made a noise that might have been a laugh. It came out dry, like my chest forgot how to help. I told myself not to ruin the night for everyone. That thought landed wrong, and I tasted metal. My wife kept going because of course she did. I mean, if I had met you first. She waved a hand like it was harmless trivia. Jenna's eyes widened and I saw panic flash. I held my fork midair and froze. I didn't want to look weak, so I looked calm. Inside, I was counting reasons to stand up. My feet stayed planted, and that scared me more. Kyle's wife cleared her throat and forced a smile. Wow, that's a thing to say. Her voice sounded careful, like she was handling glass. My wife giggled again and my stomach twisted. I leaned closer to my wife, still smiling for the crowd. Can we not do this right now? I kept my voice low, almost polite. She patted my hand like I was being sensitive. That little pat was worse than the words. It told me she thought I would swallow it. I nodded once because I did swallow it. Then I watched Kyle's jaw tighten like he was bracing. Jenna tried to save it with a joke about dating apps. Nobody laughed the right way after that. People moved food around and avoided eye contact. I felt like I was trapped inside a public scene. My wife reached for Kyle's arm again, slow and casual. Seriously, you just get it. Kyle pulled back a little, almost invisible. His wife noticed and her face went flat. I kept thinking, this is my marriage on display. Not the good parts, not the private repair work. Just this moment served up like entertainment. And I couldn't stop it, not without looking crazy. I tried to redirect her with a question about work. She answered me without looking at me. Her attention stayed locked on Kyle like a magnet. I felt myself shrinking in my own chair. At one point, Kyle finally spoke, eyes on his plate. I'm not sure that's fair to your husband. His voice was steady, which made it worse. My wife laughed like he was flirting back. I watched Jenna's hands grip the edge of the table. I watched Kyle's wife stop eating altogether. I watched my wife enjoy the power of the moment. And I realized she wasn't embarrassed yet. I tried one more time, a little firmer. Hey, stop. I didn't raise my voice, but it cut the air. My wife blinked at me like I interrupted her show. She leaned back and rolled her eyes. Relax, it's a compliment. She said it like I was ruining something sweet. My chest went tight and my thoughts got ugly. I wanted to stand up and walk out. I pictured myself doing it, and I pictured the fallout. I stayed seated anyway because I'm stubborn and stupid. That choice sat heavy and it didn't feel like love. The rest of the dinner moved like a bad replay. People talked, but their words felt thin. My wife acted normal, like nothing happened. I kept waiting for her to catch my stare. When she finally did, she smiled at me, bright and easy. It was the same smile she used in photos. It hit me that she believed it would fix everything. So I smiled back and it felt like betrayal. Jenna offered dessert and nobody wanted it. Kyle's wife said she had an early morning. Kyle nodded fast, like he was grateful for an exit. My wife looked disappointed and nodded at me. I stood up and pushed my chair in quietly. My hands were steady, which surprised me. I told everyone thanks for having us, voice flat. My wife kissed Jenna's cheek and lingered. At the door, Kyle's wife avoided my eyes. Kyle gave me a quick look that felt like an apology. I nodded like I understood, even though I didn't. My wife slipped her arm through mine like nothing changed. We walked to the car and she hummed to herself. I opened the passenger door for her on autopilot. She slid in and checked her phone, still cheerful. I shut the door harder than I meant to, and she finally looked up. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles ached. She buckled in and stopped. Our head scrolling like we were fine. The road noise filled the space she should have filled. I kept waiting for her to notice my shaking hands. Do you understand what you did in there? My voice came out clipped, like it belonged to somebody else. She blinked at me, then tossed her hair back. Mark, it was nothing, and my jaw tightened hard. Nothing. That word hit like a slap with a smile. I glanced at her and saw zero urgency. It made me wonder what else she called nothing. I pulled up to a stoplight and looked straight ahead. Say it was a mistake. She exhaled loud and crossed her arms. Why are you making it weird? And my stomach turned. I wanted to argue clean and logical. Instead, I heard myself go low and mean. You did that in front of everyone. She shrugged once like I mentioned spilled water. She started naming excuses like they were receipts. Everybody jokes, Kyle can take it, Jenna laughed. My hands kept tapping the wheel in a stupid rhythm. I hated that I was counting breaths like I was drowning. I pulled into our place and killed the engine. Neither of us moved for a second. She finally looked over and tried a soft voice. Babe, don't do this, and I almost snapped. I got out first and walked inside without waiting. She followed behind, still talking like I was unreasonable. I didn't answer because my mouth felt dangerous. Her footsteps stayed close like she wanted control. She stepped in front of me and blocked the hallway. Her palms went up like a referee. Can you calm down for 5 minutes? I stared at her hands and thought about Kyle's arm. Why him? That was all I could manage without yelling. Her face changed for half a beat, then reset. Because he's easy to compliment, and I heard the dodge. I walked past her and grabbed a pillow. Not dramatic, just functional. I moved to the couch and sat down too hard. She stood there like I'd insulted her family. You're sleeping out here over a dumb comment. Her tone turned sharp like she found her footing. I nodded once because words would spill. She rolled her eyes and walked away too fast. I heard her in the kitchen, tapping and swiping. That sound became its own kind of threat. Then the notification chime hit, bright and casual. My chest tightened like it recognized a pattern. I stood up and went to the doorway. She had her phone angled down, thumbs flying. When she noticed me, she tilted the screen away. That tiny move did more damage than her whole speech. What are you doing? She didn't answer right away, which was an answer. It's Jenna, she's asking if you're mad. She kept typing while saying it, which felt gross. Show me. I didn't yell, but the room felt smaller. She laughed once, short and annoyed. I'm not handing you my phone like you're my dad. That line made my face go hot. I backed up because I didn't trust myself closer. Then stop texting about me like I'm not here. She looked offended, like privacy was the real crime. She walked into the bedroom and shut the door. Not slammed, just firm. I sat back down and stared at the dark screen of the TV. My own mind kept replaying her tone like a loop. A few minutes later, her phone buzzed again. She had left it charging on the counter. The screen lit up with a preview banner. I saw the words, "I swear he's fine," and I froze. I know how that sounds. I know it sounds like I went hunting. But she left it there, bright and loud. My feet moved before my pride could stop them. I didn't pick it up at first. I just stared at the preview until it dimmed. Then it lit again with another message. This time it said, "Kyle is just different," and my throat went tight. I grabbed the phone like it was hot. My hands hovered, then my thumb swiped. The lock screen asked for her code. Of course it did, and I felt both relief and rage. I set it back down like it burned me. Then I remembered the tablet we share for bills. No, I'm not proud of that thought either. I walked to it anyway because my brain wanted proof. It was still logged into her messaging app. I wish I could tell you I stopped there. I didn't stop because I was already in it. My finger tapped her thread with Jenna and my pulse spiked. The first thing I saw was a string of laughing emojis. Then a message from my wife popped up near the top. Mark got sensitive, I didn't mean it like that. I read it twice and felt something inside me crack. Jenna replied with one sentence. You can't say that stuff about Kyle in front of her. I reread that word her. My eyes slid to the next line and my stomach dropped. My wife answered fast. I know I slipped, he's literally my type though. No typo, no backtracking, just that. My mouth went dry like I'd swallowed dust. I scrolled down with shaking fingers. A message from earlier in the week popped up. Seeing Kyle again is going to mess me up. I stared at it until my vision blurred. There was a voice memo. Below that line. I hovered over it like it was a snake. Then I hit play because apparently I hate myself. Her voice filled the room and it sounded too excited. She wasn't talking about me at all. She was talking about his laugh, his calm, his energy. She called it safe but thrilling, like that made sense. I paused it halfway through and sat down hard. My hands started sweating. I wiped them on my jeans, then hated that too. I kept thinking, how long has this been simmering? The answer felt close, like it was waiting. Another message sat under the memo. Jenna wrote, don't flirt with that fire again. My wife replied, I'm not flirting, I'm just honest. Honest, that word landed like a punch. I heard the bedroom door open behind me. I didn't turn around right away. Her step stopped when she saw the screen glow. Then her voice went flat and my blood went cold. Are you on my messages right now? I looked up at her and couldn't find a clean lie. I held the tablet out like a weapon and felt sick. Her face tightened and I knew this was about to get worse. She lunged and grabbed the tablet from my hands. Her fingers moved fast like she practiced that move. The screen went dark and she held it to her chest. Her stare sharpened like I was the one who crossed a line. You went through my stuff. Her voice came out flat, almost bored. I nodded once because denying would be pathetic. She took a step closer and I felt cornered in my own home. Say you didn't. She pointed at me with the tablet edge. I shook my head slow, like ripping off a bandage. Her lips pressed tight and I knew she wanted anger. I forced my hands open at my sides. Look at what you wrote. My voice wobbled and I hated that weakness. She laughed like I was doing a bad skit. It was venting. She waved the tablet like it proved innocence. Everybody vents. I stared at her and wondered when everybody became her shield. You called him your type. I kept it plain because fancy words would fail. Her eyes flicked away for a split second. That tiny dodge told me I was standing on a real nerve. She moved toward the kitchen and set the tablet down hard. Then she folded her arms and turned her chin up. You're acting unhinged. I heard the insult land and I felt my temper crawl up. Not gonna lie, I almost yelled. I swallowed it and breathed through my nose like a joke. Don't flip this on me. Her eyebrows lifted like I just confirmed her story. She paced 2 steps and stopped. Are you really going to police my thoughts? She made it sound noble, like she was defending freedom. I pictured her voice memo again and my jaw clenched. Those weren't thoughts. I pointed toward the tablet without touching it. That was a plan you rehearsed with your friend. She flinched, and the flinch was the loudest thing in the room. She grabbed her phone from the counter and held it up. I can't believe you right now. Her thumb hovered over the screen like a threat. I saw her ready to call Jenna, and I leaned in. Do it. 2 words, nothing else. Her eyes widened then narrowed. She didn't like that I wasn't begging. She started typing with angry taps. I watched her shoulders tighten while she wrote. Then she stopped and looked at me, almost disgusted. You want to humiliate me now too. I took a slow step back. You humiliated me first. My voice cracked on the last word and it made me furious. She stared at my face like she wanted to erase it. She walked past me toward the bedroom. I followed, not touching her, not pleading. I hated myself for trailing behind like that. She spun around at the doorway and blocked me. This is insane. She jabbed a finger at my chest. Normal husbands don't snoop. I looked at that finger and thought about how calm she sounded. Normal wives don't audition other men at dinner. That came out harsher than I meant. Her mouth opened then shut. For 1 second she looked scared, and I leaned into it. Call Jenna. I kept my voice steady this time. Put it on speaker. She stared like I asked for something illegal. No. One word, quick and sharp. I nodded like I expected that. Then I walked to the living room and grabbed my keys. Her voice chased me down the hall. Where are you going? I stopped with my hand on the lock. I didn't know where I was going, and that felt dangerous. I turned back and held up the keys. Either we clear it up now or I leave tonight. Her eyes widened again and I saw panic break through. She hates losing control more than she hates hurting me. She swallowed and lifted her phone. Fine. Her hands trembled a little as she tapped the screen. That shake made me feel sick because I caused it. The call rang twice. Jenna picked up fast like she was waiting. Hey girl, you okay? My wife stiffened at the greeting and I raised my eyebrows. Speaker, I whispered. My wife hesitated, then hit the button. The click sounded loud like a judge's gavel. Jenna's voice filled the room and I didn't blink. Jenna, you saw what happened. My wife kept her tone light, too light. I need you to tell Mark it was a dumb joke. She glanced at me like she expected me to nod along. Jenna went quiet for a beat. Then her voice dropped, careful. I don't know if I can do that. My wife's face lost color and my heart started racing. What do you mean? My wife laughed once, forced and thin. Come on, help me out. Jenna exhaled like she was tired. You said it earlier too. Jenna's words came slow, like she was choosing each one. You said it before dinner in my kitchen. My wife's eyes snapped to mine and she looked caught. My mouth went dry. I didn't speak because I didn't trust my sound. My wife shook her head fast, like denial could rewind time. Jenna, stop. Jenna didn't stop. You told me you wished you met Kyle first. Her voice stayed calm, which made it worse. You said you could have had a different life. My wife's hands started to shake and she pressed them to her thighs. My wife snapped into defense mode. That's not what I meant. She spoke too fast, words tripping over each other. It was just a dumb thought. I stared at her like she was a stranger wearing her face. I leaned toward the phone. Is that all she said? My voice came out low and steady, which surprised me. There was a pause on the line, then a soft no. That single word hit like a door slamming. My wife's eyes flashed at me. She shook her head at the phone like a warning. Jenna ignored her again, and I respected it more than I should. You want the full thing? My wife tried to grab the phone off speaker. I caught her wrist without thinking. Not hard, just enough to stop the motion. She froze and I realized how close we were to ugly. I let go right away. My hand felt dirty, like I crossed a line too. My wife held the phone close and stared at the wall. I waited because silence was safer than rage. Jenna's voice came back, steady and blunt. She said you're safe. My chest tightened on that word. Jenna kept going anyway, and I felt myself brace. She said Kyle makes her feel alive. Jenna said it like she hated saying it. My wife squeezed her eyes shut, like a kid caught stealing. I stared at the floor because looking at her felt like poison. My wife whispered, please. It wasn't to me, and that stung. Jenna hesitated, then pushed forward. She said she settles into you. That line did damage I still can't fully explain. Not because it was clever, because it was casual. Like she had rehearsed the phrase and liked it. I felt my hands go numb and I flexed my fingers. My wife snapped back at the phone. Why are you doing this? Her voice got high, almost frantic. Jenna's response came quick, with zero fluff. Because you asked me to lie for you. My wife's face twisted like she got slapped. She turned toward me with wet eyes. The look said, save me, fix this, make it go away. I didn't move and she looked almost shocked. I spoke again, slow and controlled. Jenna, did she ever message Kyle? My stomach turned as I asked, because I wanted the answer. Jenna paused long enough to scare me. Then she said, not that I know. My wife jumped on that like a life raft. There. She pointed at me like she won a case. I didn't message him. I didn't feel relief. I felt a different dread, the kind that grows legs. Because she was celebrating the bare minimum. And I couldn't unhear the rest. Jenna cleared her throat. I told her to stop. There was actual anger in her voice now. I told her not to do this around Kyle's wife. My wife flinched like the reminder burned. My wife stared down at the phone. Her thumb hovered near the end call button. She wanted the control back and I saw it. I didn't reach for the phone because I wanted her choice. Jenna added one more detail, like a final nail. She said if he ever showed interest, she'd be tempted. My wife's head snapped up, eyes wide. That's not what I said, she hissed too quick. Jenna didn't back off. You said tempted. Her voice stayed flat, like she was reading a label. My wife's mouth opened and nothing came out. The silence felt like a confession all by itself. I took a step away from both of them. I felt too exposed standing in the middle of it. My wife's breathing got fast, almost ragged. It hit me that she wasn't sorry yet, she was trapped. I pointed at the phone. Jenna, thank you, that's enough. Jenna let out a shaky breath like she was relieved. I'm sorry, Mark, and the sincerity made me feel worse. My wife ended the call with a hard tap. Then she stood there holding the phone like a weapon. Her eyes were wet, but her posture stayed stubborn. She looked ready to fight, and I felt tired. You forced that, she snapped. She paced 2 steps, then spun back. You wanted to punish me. I stared at her and realized she still saw herself as the victim. I wanted truth. That was all I had left in the tank. My voice came out calm, which scared me more than yelling. She opened her mouth to argue, then her face cracked. She covered her mouth with her hand and made a broken sound. Then she sank onto the edge of the couch, shaking. I didn't mean it like that, she choked out. I watched her cry and felt nothing, which terrified me. Sincerely, I wanted to comfort her. I also wanted to pack a bag and disappear. I stood there stuck between those instincts like a bad joke. She looked up at me through tears and reached out. Please don't leave. Her voice was small, almost childlike. I didn't take her hand and she pulled it back fast. That tiny rejection landed heavy between us. Tell me what you actually want. My words came slow, measured, almost clinical. She wiped her face with her sleeve and swallowed hard. I want you, she whispered, and it sounded rehearsed. I shook my head without thinking. That's not an answer. She stared at me like I was impossible. Then she said the worst kind of truth, the messy kind. I want to feel wanted. Her voice cracked on the second word. I want someone to look at me like I'm a prize. I felt a flash of guilt, then anger chased it away. You picked a married guy for that fantasy. I kept my tone blunt because soft wouldn't survive. She flinched and nodded like she knew. I know, she whispered, and her shame finally looked real. I walked to the kitchen and grabbed a glass of water. My hand shook and I almost dropped it. I hated that my body was betraying me again. I drank anyway, and it tasted like metal. When I turned back, she was standing again. She held her phone out toward me, screen facing up. Look, take it, read everything. Her voice sounded desperate, and desperation can be theater. I didn't take it right away. I stared at the phone like it might bite. Why now? She swallowed and her eyes went glassy. Because I messed up. She rubbed her forehead like it hurt. Because I heard myself on speaker and I hated it. I watched her face, trying to find the real person. I stepped closer and took the phone. My hand steadied, which felt unreal. I scrolled without rushing, looking for the landmines. She stood beside me, trembling, waiting for impact. I found more messages to Jenna. Not about meeting him, about watching him. Little comments that felt like breadcrumbs to nowhere good. Every line made my chest tighten again. I handed the phone back without a word. My silence made her panic harder. Say something. Her voice cracked and I stayed quiet anyway. I moved toward the bedroom and started pulling clothes out. Not neatly, not angry, just fast. She followed right behind me, hands fluttering. What are you doing? She asked, and I didn't answer. She grabbed my arm, softer this time. I looked down at her hand and felt a wave of disgust. Not at her hand, at how my brain reacted to it. I pulled free and she recoiled like I slapped her. "I'm not leaving you." She said it like a promise she could enforce. I zipped my bag and looked straight at her. "You don't get to decide that." Her eyes widened and she started shaking again. "Please just stay tonight." I stared at her and felt my resolve wobble. Then I thought about Kyle's wife hearing that line at dinner. I walked to the front door with the bag. She hurried in front of me, blocking it again. Her voice dropped urgent and raw. "I'll do anything," she said, and I believed her for the wrong reasons. I held the bag at my side and stared at her. My brain kept flipping between rage and pity. I hate that pity showed up first. Then her phone buzzed in her hand, and her eyes flicked down. That reflex did it. Not the buzz, the reflex. She still had a world with Jenna in it, even now. And I realized I hadn't even asked the scariest question yet. I set the bag down by the door and didn't blink. She stepped between me and the handle again. Her hands hovered like she feared touching me now. I kept my eyes on the lock and waited for the next move. "Give me 1 week." Her voice came out rough, not cute this time. I stared at her mouth like it could spit poison again. A week sounded small, yet it felt like a trap. I didn't answer right away, which made her start bargaining. "No drinking, no Jenna, I'll do therapy, anything." She said anything like she could erase a whole night. My silence made her words pile up and the pile got heavy. I held up one finger. 1 week means rules." Her head bobbed fast like she'd agree to anything breathing. I hated that part of me liked having leverage. I pointed at her phone. "Right now you cut her off." She flinched, then swallowed like it tasted bitter. "You want me to end my friendship?" And her eyes searched for mercy. I nodded once, slow and final. "You used that friendship to build the fantasy." She inhaled and seemed to fight herself for a second. Then she unlocked her phone with shaking hands and sat down hard. She opened Jenna's thread and hovered over the keyboard. Her thumb froze, then jabbed at the screen. I didn't read every word, but I watched the tone change. When she hit send, her shoulders dropped like a weight landed. "Show me." She turned the phone toward me without a fight. It said she needed space and that the line was crossed. I looked up at her face and saw pure fear, real fear. I gestured at the next step. "Block her." Her lips parted like she wanted to argue, then didn't. The block button clicked, and the sound felt louder than it should. She held the phone out again, palm up. "Done." I took a breath and felt no relief at all. Have you ever gotten what you demanded and still felt empty? I moved my bag away from the door. Not because I forgave her, not even close. Because I wanted to see what she did next. She watched the bag shift and started crying harder. "Don't punish me." That line made my skin crawl. She still wanted the story where she was the harmed one. I let that sit there, ugly and obvious. "I'm not punishing you." I kept my voice calm on purpose. "I'm protecting myself." She wiped her face fast and nodded like a child in trouble. She tried to hug me, then stopped mid-step. Her arms hovered, then dropped. Good call, because I might have flinched. The space between us felt like a warning sign. I slept in the living room again. Not out of drama, out of survival. She brought me water and stood there waiting for gratitude. I didn't take it from her hand and her face pinched. "Please talk to me." Her voice shook and I almost softened. Then I remembered that voice memo tone and my chest went cold. I turned away and she stood there like a ghost. She went to bed alone and left the door cracked. That crack felt like bait, so I stayed put. I stared at the ceiling and counted small sounds. Every sound asked the same question: what else is hidden? Morning came and she was already up. She didn't greet me with a smile this time. She slid a sticky note toward me with a number on it. "Counselor, they can see us today," and her hand trembled. I stared at the note like it might explode. Part of me wanted to tear it up and walk. Another part wanted a referee badly. I pocketed it without a word, and she exhaled in relief. She followed me around like a careful dog. Not touching, not joking, just watching. It made me angry in a different way. Because now she could act good without facing the rot. I went to work and did nothing useful. My brain kept replaying the dinner scene in new angles. Every angle made me feel smaller and meaner. By lunch, I was Googling divorce steps like a coward. She texted once, "Are you still coming to the appointment?" I stared at the screen, then put my phone down. Not answering felt like power, and I hated wanting power. I drove home early and found her waiting by the door. She didn't rush me, which felt calculated. She just held her phone out again, screen open. On it was her blocked list, Jenna's name sitting there. "Okay." I heard myself say it like a judge. She nodded fast, then slowed herself down. Her face tried to look steady, but her eyes kept begging. On the way to the counselor, she stayed quiet. Not polite quiet, scared quiet. I watched her hands twist in her lap, then stop. She wanted to perform remorse, and I wanted to test it. At a red light, she whispered, "I didn't touch him." I didn't look at her. "I'm not only worried about hands." My voice came out flat, and that scared her more. We walked into the office and sat apart. The counselor greeted us and looked between our faces. He asked why we were there, simple and direct. My wife opened her mouth, then froze like she couldn't choose a lie. I jumped in because I couldn't stand her steering it. She compared me to her friend's husband. I kept it short and ugly, no soft edges. The counselor's eyes narrowed a little, like he understood the hit. My wife tried to fill the space with apologies. "I messed up, I wasn't thinking, I hate myself for it." Her words came fast and messy, like she feared silence. The counselor held up a hand and stopped her. "Tell me what you wanted in that moment." He leaned forward, calm as stone. My wife's mouth twitched, then shut again. Her eyes darted to me like I might punish the truth. I didn't rescue her. I sat back and let her squirm. Not my proudest moment, but it was honest. She swallowed hard and finally spoke. "I wanted to feel special." Her voice dropped low, almost embarrassed. "I wanted someone to look at me like I mattered." When she said that, I felt a flicker of guilt, then anger crushed it. The counselor nodded like it made sense. Then he looked at me without flinching. "Do you believe that's what happened?" That question landed like a spotlight, and I felt exposed. I wanted to say she won. Did Kyle? I wanted to say she wanted to replace me. Instead, I heard myself say she wanted attention. The counselor didn't argue, which annoyed me. He asked my wife for details, not history. Was this a pattern or a one-time slip? She hesitated, then shook her head fast. "One time," she insisted, and my eyes narrowed. The counselor watched her hands. He asked about the messages. My wife flinched at that word like it burned. She nodded and admitted she talked to Jenna about Kyle. I waited for her to minimize it again. She surprised me and didn't. "I fed it, I liked it," she said, voice cracking. Hearing that out loud made my stomach turn anyway. Then the counselor asked about boundaries. "What have you done since?" My wife straightened like a student with homework. "I blocked Jenna, I offered full phone access, I'm here," and she looked at me. I didn't nod. I didn't praise her for basic decency. I just sat there and felt heavy. The counselor noticed, and I could tell he was about to poke me. "Mark, what do you need to feel safe?" I hated that word safe because it sounded weak. I said no contact with them, no secret chats, no games. The counselor nodded like it was reasonable, and my wife nodded too fast. He didn't stop there. He leaned back and studied me. Why did this land so deep? My throat tightened and I almost snapped back with sarcasm. Because it was humiliation, that's why. Because I heard it in front of witnesses. Because I felt disposable in real time. But I didn't want to sound needy, so I said something colder. Because it showed me who I might be to her. The counselor held my gaze. He didn't let me dodge behind tough talk. He asked, "And who do you think you are to her?" I didn't answer right away. My wife started to, then stopped herself. Good, because I needed my own words. "I think I'm the stable choice," I said, and my mouth went bitter. My wife flinched at stable like it cut. She whispered, "That's not fair." The counselor lifted a hand again and kept control. He asked her, "Is it true, even a little?" She looked down and nodded once. Not a full surrender, but enough. My chest felt tight, like air wasn't reaching the right spots. The counselor let the silence hang until it got uncomfortable. Then he asked the question I didn't expect. Mark, what has she been asking you for lately? I opened my mouth and nothing came out. Because I knew the answer and I didn't want to say it. My wife's eyes slid toward me cautious. The counselor repeated it slower. What has she asked you for that you ignored? That word ignored hit me like a slap, and I felt defensive heat rise. I didn't ignore hers. I leaned forward too sharp. I work, I provide, I'm here. The counselor didn't flinch, which made me feel even smaller. He nodded like he'd heard that speech 1,000 times. Then he asked, do you show up or do you exist? I felt my face heat up, and I hated him for being right. My wife stared at her hands like she didn't want to watch me bleed. I wanted to walk out right then. I wanted to say this was her mess, not mine. Then I remembered my own silence at dinner. I stayed seated and my legs shook under the chair. The counselor asked me about my reaction at the dinner. Why didn't you leave? I shrugged like I didn't know, but I did know. Because leaving would have made me look weak in public, and I feared that. He tilted his head. So you stayed to look strong and felt powerless anyway. That sentence punched me in the chest. I glanced at my wife and she was crying quietly again. The counselor didn't coddle her. He also didn't attack her. He asked her, did you want him to react? My wife wiped her face and nodded, shame all over her. I wanted him to fight for me. She said it like it hurt to say. I wanted him to get jealous and pull me close. I stared at her like she was speaking a different language. You did it in front of Kyle's wife. My voice came out low and sharp. My wife flinched, then nodded again. I know, she whispered, and the words sounded real this time. The counselor leaned forward. Do you understand what you risked? My wife's shoulders folded inward. I risked my marriage, she said, and her voice shook. He didn't let her stop at the obvious. You risked other people's marriage too. My wife's eyes widened like she hadn't fully faced that. She nodded and her chin quivered like she might break. He asked about Jenna. Why was Jenna the person you fed this to? My wife hesitated, then sighed. Because she cheers for chaos, she admitted, and that felt like progress. I expected the counselor to tell her to end that friendship forever. He didn't issue commands like that. He asked her what boundary she was willing to hold. My wife swallowed and said, no contact, not for now, maybe not ever. Hearing her say it out loud made it more real, more dangerous. Then he turned to me again. Mark, what did you do when she felt lonely? I bristled at the framing. I started to defend myself and he raised his hand. Not why, what? That shut me up because it demanded specifics. I thought about nights on my phone, half listening. I thought about how often I answered her with one word. I shut down. The admission tasted like dirt. My wife glanced up like she couldn't believe I said it. The counselor nodded like he expected it all along. He asked me why I shut down. I could have blamed stress, work, exhaustion. All true, all convenient. I picked the harder truth because it was sitting there. Because I didn't want to fight. I looked at my hands and hated them. If I stayed quiet, nothing blew up. The counselor leaned in, and I knew he was about to twist the knife. And when nothing blew up, what happened to intimacy? He said intimacy like a neutral word, not a weapon. My face burned anyway. My wife stared at the floor, and I could feel her shame filling the room. I swallowed and forced the answer out. It died. One word, brutal. The counselor let it sit there like a dead thing on a table. My wife whispered, I tried. She didn't sound angry, just defeated. I looked at her and felt guilt spike again. Then I remembered Kyle's name in her texts, and the guilt flipped back to rage. The counselor watched my face change. He asked, can you hold both truths at once? I wanted to say no, because it felt impossible. But I stayed quiet, and silence was my oldest habit. He gave us an assignment for the week. No contact with Jenna, no contact with Kyle. A nightly check-in with strict rules, 10 minutes only. He warned us that honesty would feel worse before it felt better, and I believed him. We left the office and walked to the car without touching. My wife tried to speak, then stopped. I could tell she wanted reassurance, and I refused to give it. She stared ahead like she might throw up. In the parking lot, she finally broke the quiet. "Do you hate me?" Her voice shook on the last word. I looked at her and felt too many things at once: anger, grief, even a sliver of pity. "I don't know yet." That was the only honest answer I had. Her eyes filled again, and she nodded like she deserved it. Then her phone buzzed in her pocket, and she froze like an animal hearing a trap. My thumb hovered over Jenna's invite until it cramped. My wife stood behind me, hands clenched at her sides. "Just read it," her voice cracked, then stopped. I opened the message anyway, and the words felt loaded. Jenna wanted to clear the air over dinner. She added a smiley like it could disinfect anything. My wife whispered, "It's a chance." A chance for what exactly? To pretend. I stared at the screen, then locked it. My wife watched me like I was a judge. "You don't have to," she rushed out. Her tone screamed that I absolutely had to. I didn't answer with a yes or no. I walked to the closet and pulled out a shirt. Not fancy, not angry, just something clean. That choice made her inhale like I picked a side. On the drive over, she kept her hands in her lap. She didn't reach for me, which was new. I caught her rehearsing words under her breath. It sounded like someone practicing for trial. When we pulled up, my stomach turned hard. I almost told her to keep driving. Instead, I shut the door and started walking. My feet moved like they remembered humiliation. Jenna opened the door fast, eyes already wet. She stepped aside like she wanted us inside quickly. "I'm sorry," she blurted, voice shaking. I didn't soften because sorry can be cheap. We walked in and stopped short. Kyle was already there, standing near the table. He looked at me like I might swing. Then he lifted both palms, slow and open. "I didn't ask for any of this," he said. His voice stayed steady, almost stiff. I believed him in that moment, and it annoyed me. Because it made the mess feel even more pointless. Kyle's wife stood near the kitchen entrance. Her arms were folded, expression unreadable. She looked past me and straight at my wife. That gaze felt like a blade waiting to move. My wife swallowed and stepped forward first. She didn't smile, didn't laugh, didn't play cute. "I owe you an apology," she said to Kyle's wife. The room held its breath for her next line. Kyle's wife didn't nod or wave it off. "Go on," she replied, flat and tired. My wife's shoulders sagged like she expected that. Then she kept going anyway, voice low. "I crossed a line at dinner. I crossed it before dinner too." She glanced at Jenna like she hated admitting it. Jenna's eyes dropped to the floor, guilty and small. I stood there and felt my pulse climb again. Part of me wanted to stop it and leave. Part of me wanted every ugly detail out loud. Isn't that sick, a wanting pain because it's honest? Kyle cleared his throat and shifted his weight. He looked at his wife like he needed permission. "I'm sorry it went thigh. As far," he said to me. His wife didn't react, and that silence hit hard. My wife turned toward me and her hands shook. "I told Jenna things I shouldn't have told anyone. She didn't dress it up this time." She stared at my face like she could read my verdict. Jenna stepped forward, eyes shiny with panic. "I didn't think you'd say it in front of them," she snapped. Then she caught herself and looked at me fast. "I mean, I didn't think it would blow up like that." That little correction told me plenty. Jenna cared about fallout, not about right and wrong. My wife looked at Jenna like she finally saw her clearly. The friendship cracked in real time right there. Kyle's wife took a slow breath. "Did you ever message him?" she asked my wife. No anger in it, just exhaustion. My wife shook her head hard, almost desperate. "No." She lifted her phone and held it out like proof. Kyle's wife didn't even look at it. She looked at Kyle instead, like checking his face for rot. Kyle's voice stayed calm, but his jaw was tight. "I never flirted with her," he said. He didn't look at my wife when he spoke. That avoidance made it feel more credible, and I hated that too. Jenna tried to jump in with damage control. "Everyone talks like that sometimes." Kyle's wife snapped her head toward Jenna. "Not in my house," she cut in, sharp and final. That shut Jenna up fast. My wife flinched like she deserved the heat. I stayed quiet because my mouth was a weapon tonight. I watched my wife's fingers twist, then go still. My wife faced Kyle's wife again, voice trembling. I made you feel unsafe in your marriage. She said it clean, no excuses. Kyle's wife's eyes glistened and she turned away. Kyle's wife walked to the sink and gripped the edge. She didn't cry loud, but her shoulders rose and fell. Kyle moved toward her, then stopped like he wasn't sure. My own chest tightened at that tiny hesitation. Kyle's wife wiped her face and turned back. I'm not your therapist, she said to my wife. I accept the apology, but I won't be your audience. My wife nodded fast, like she got punched, and agreed. Jenna started talking again, voice shaky and defensive. I'm sorry too, okay? Kyle's wife stared at her and didn't answer. That silence was louder than any yelling. Jenna looked at me next, like I owed her comfort. I kept my eyes on the floor for a beat. Then I looked up and asked one question. Why did you encourage it? Jenna's mouth opened, then closed. She tried a laugh that died halfway. I didn't encourage anything, she insisted. My wife made a small sound like a choke. I turned toward my wife, slow and direct. Did she encourage it? My wife's eyes flicked between us. Then she nodded, tiny and honest, and Jenna stiffened. Jenna's face flushed with anger. You're throwing me under the bus. My wife didn't flinch this time. You handed me the keys, she said, voice low. That line shocked me. It wasn't poetic, it was blunt and real. Jenna stared like she got slapped in public. Kyle's wife exhaled like she'd heard enough. Kyle stepped between the women, palms out. Stop, he said, firm. His wife nodded once and backed away from the tension. My wife watched Kyle block the chaos, and her eyes filled again. I spoke before I could second-guess it. Kyle, did she ever hint to you privately? Kyle shook his head fast. Never, he answered, and his voice sounded annoyed. Kyle's wife glanced at me, then at my wife. Why him, she asked, blunt and sharp. Not curious, not cruel, just demanding truth. My wife swallowed hard, then answered anyway. Because he feels steady, she said. Then she shook her head like she hated the word. And because I was chasing a feeling. Her hands trembled and she didn't hide it. Jenna scoffed under her breath. Kyle's wife shot her a look that could cut metal. Jenna shut up again instantly. My wife kept talking, voice quiet and raw. I wanted to feel chosen. I wanted it so badly I got reckless. She looked at me now, not at them. I made it public because I wanted a reaction. That last part made my stomach clench. Because it was true and I knew it. I remembered staying still at the table. My pride had helped build the stage, didn't it? Kyle's wife rubbed her temple and sighed. This is a mess, she muttered. Kyle nodded, eyes heavy. Jenna looked like she wanted to argue, then didn't. My wife took one step toward me, careful. I'm not asking you to forget. Her voice shook, but it didn't beg. I'm asking you to watch what I do next. That hit different than please don't leave. It sounded like accountability, not panic. I felt my guard twitch, then rebuild. Because trust doesn't grow from one sentence, right? Jenna tried to grab the conversation back. So what now, she asked, brittle. Kyle's wife answered without looking at her. Now you stop stirring people's lives. Jenna's face tightened like she wanted to scream. She glanced at my wife like she expected backup. My wife didn't give it to her. That lack of alliance changed the room. My wife picked up her phone and tapped a few times. Jenna watched, suspicious and tense. My wife turned the screen toward Jenna. Your number is blocked, she said, calm and final. Jenna's mouth fell open, then twisted. You're blaming me for your mouth. My wife didn't raise her voice. I'm blaming you for feeding the worst parts of me. Kyle's wife let out a tired laugh with no humor. Welcome to adulthood, she muttered. Kyle touched her shoulder, gentle. My wife looked like she might fall apart again. I watched my wife's face and felt conflicted. I still felt betrayed, obviously. I also saw her taking hits without dodging. That mattered more than I wanted to admit. Jenna grabbed her purse and moved toward the door. Fine, she snapped, voice shaking with rage. She looked at me like I should rescue her image. I didn't move and she stormed out anyway. The door shut and the house went still. Kyle's wife exhaled and sat down. Kyle sat beside her but left space between them. That small distance told me they were hurting too. Kyle's wife looked at my wife, eyes tired. I don't hate you, she said blunt. I hate what you brought into my week. My wife nodded, tears sliding again, and she didn't wipe them. Kyle's wife turned to me next. Are you okay? She asked, quiet. That question hit harder than any insult. I shrugged because my truth didn't fit in a neat answer. Kyle stood up and looked at me straight. I'm sorry this happened, he said again. This time his voice sounded genuinely upset. I believed him, and it made me feel ridiculous. Kyle's wife stood too, like ending the meeting. We're done here, she said. No drama, no speech, just a boundary. My wife murmured thanks, and it sounded like shame. We walked out into the night without touching. My wife kept her hands to herself, which helped. I could hear my own breathing, harsh and uneven. I kept waiting for her to say something wrong again. She didn't talk in the car. She didn't reach for her phone either. That quiet felt earned, not performative. It also scared me because quiet can hide things. At a stop sign, she finally spoke. You can leave if you need to. No begging, no guilt, just an opening. My chest tightened because that sounded like real respect. I gripped the wheel and stared ahead. You're not getting credit for basic decency. She nodded and she didn't argue. That lack of pushback made me feel even more exposed. We got home and she sat at the table. She didn't follow me around, didn't hover. She waited like she understood she had no rights tonight. That patience made me angry because it worked. I opened the fridge and stared inside like an idiot. I wasn't hungry, I was stalling. My brain kept replaying her apology to Kyle's wife. It sounded sincere, and that confused me. I shut the fridge and leaned against the counter. You knew it would hurt me, I said. She didn't deny it this time. I knew, she whispered, and that honesty hurt worse. I stared at her and felt my throat tighten. Then why do it? She looked up, eyes red, and didn't rush. Because I wanted to feel alive, she said, plain and ugly. I laughed once, sharp and bitter. Alive, I repeated, and it tasted like poison. She flinched, then held her ground. I'm not proud of it, she added, voice shaking. I paced 2 steps and stopped. I didn't want to be cruel, but I was close. You used another marriage as a prop. She nodded fast, face crumpling, and the shame looked real. I did. 2 words, no dodge. Then she pressed a palm to her chest like it hurt physically. I hate that I did, she whispered, and her voice broke. I sat across from her finally. Not close, but in the same space. My hands trembled, and I hid them under the table. I didn't want her to see how damaged I felt. She slid her phone across the table. Not dramatic, not pleading, just there. I won't hide things anymore, she said. The offer felt heavy, like a handcuff and a gift. I didn't touch the phone. Instead, I looked at her face and tried to read it. Sincerely, I wanted certainty and got none. Have you ever wanted a lie because it's simpler? She spoke again, careful. I'm going to keep going to therapy. She tapped the table once like a promise marker. I'll do the work even if you leave. That last line hung in the air like a test. I felt my anger shift into something tired. Not forgiveness, not peace, just fatigue. I realized I had been clenching for weeks. My body wanted a break, even if my pride didn't. I pushed my chair back and stood. She watched me like she expected a storm. I walked to the living room and stared at the wall. I hated how small my options felt. Leave and explode everything. Stay and risk swallowing poison again. Neither choice felt like strength. It felt like picking a kind of pain. G.S. stayed at the table and didn't chase me. That mattered more than it should have. After a minute, she called out, voice low. I'm here when you're ready, and she didn't add anything else. I walked back and stopped near the doorway. She looked up, eyes swollen, waiting. I could see her trying not to perform. That restraint felt new, and it hit me hard. I can't unhear it, I said. She nodded, slow and quiet. I know, she replied, and her voice didn't argue. That acceptance took some wind out of my anger. I pulled the chair out and sat again. My hands finally touched the phone just for a second. I slid it back toward her untouched. This isn't about access, I said, and she blinked. Then what is it? Her voice sounded small but steady. I stared at the table edge and chose the honest thing. It's about whether you respect me, I said, blunt. Her eyes filled again, but she didn't melt into theatrics. I didn't, she admitted. I thought you'd stay no matter what. That last sentence hit like a confession and an insult. I felt heat rush to my face. Because she wasn't wrong about my pattern. I had stayed through smaller cuts pretending I was tough. Now I was paying for that silence. I leaned forward, voice low. If you do it again, I'm gone. No threats, no speeches, just a line. She nodded like she understood the cliff edge. I won't, she whispered. I didn't respond with comfort. I just watched her face and waited for the usual pushback. It didn't come, and that scared me too. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her ring. She set it on the table between us. I don't deserve to wear it right now, she said. That gesture punched me in the gut. I stared at the ring and felt my chest tighten. I wanted to tell her to put it back on. I also wanted to tell her it meant nothing now. I sat there stuck and my silence felt brutal. She slid it closer to me with one finger. You decide, she said, voice shaking. I hated that power in my hands. Because power can turn you into someone ugly fast. I picked up the ring and held it. It felt heavier than it should have. I set it back down, not giving it back yet. Her eyes tracked it like it was oxygen. I rubbed my face and exhaled hard. I'm not forgiving you tonight, I said. She nodded and she didn't argue. I know, she whispered, and that softness felt real. We sat there for a long minute. No talking, no bargaining, just breathing. Then I heard myself speak quieter. I can't lose my whole life over one craving. She flinched at craving, but she didn't fight it. I don't want you to lose it, she said. I stared at her and felt my anger dull slightly. Dull enough to see the human again. I reached across the table, slow and careful. I didn't touch her hand yet. I slid the ring back toward her halfway. She looked at it like she didn't deserve to blink. Put it on, I said, voice rough. She hesitated, then slipped it back on. Her fingers shook as she did it. That tiny shake cracked something open in me. I leaned back and stared at the ceiling. My throat felt tight and my eyes burned. I didn't want to cry, so I forced a breath. It came out uneven anyway, and she noticed. I'm sorry, she whispered again. Not loud, not for effect. Just a quiet statement, like she was placing it down gently. I wanted to hate her for how much I needed that. I looked at her and made the choice. Not a clean choice, not a heroic one. A messy choice full of fear and hope. I forgive you, I said, and my voice shook. Her face crumpled and she covered her mouth. She didn't rush me, didn't hug me fast. She waited like she knew forgiveness was fragile. That restraint felt like the first real change. I held up a finger because I needed one more line. I forgive you, I repeated slower. But I'm not forgetting it. Her nod was immediate and her eyes stayed on mine. We stood up at the same time, awkward and careful. She asked, "Can I hug you?" barely audible. I hesitated, then nodded, and it hurt. Her arms wrapped around me and I felt both warmth and grief. I slept in our bed that night. Not because everything was fixed. Because I wanted to stop living like a guest. She stayed on her side and didn't pull me closer. In the dark, my brain replayed that dinner sentence again. It arrived like a sting, sudden and bright. I clenched my jaw and forced my breathing steady. I forgave her and still heard it ringing.